popular demand are the Christmas carols. So we're singing those this morning. Due to the fact that we have a few people out with severe colds and flu, etc., and apart from the fact you've probably already shaken everybody's hand when you came in, it's been requested that we don't move about and read welcome this morning because of that. So we won't. You can do it if you want later, but anyway. Birthdays this week. Sevi and Kathy share a birthday on the 16th. And Jim Seaton has one on the 19th. Do we have any others? Let's do happy birthday. Several other items. We have a prayer group that goes every week, a little group, and then we have a prayer chain that goes monthly. And one of the things that gets handed out with the prayer chain is this guide. And whoever tries to keep up with all the correct names of the leadership is doing an outstanding job.
That's who's behind.
Yes, Donna sits at our computer and tries to keep all of this straight. But they pray for everything and everybody in every nation and all the leaders that they can think of around the world and across our own country. They pray for pastors, which is a good thing because when I start thinking and praying for political situations, I need an attitude adjustment that comes most effectively through prayer, so I appreciate what they're doing. And I'm beginning to think we ought to, when we get this thing updated again, we should have it for everyone if they want to have a copy of it. But it's really interesting. And not only does it cover all these, judges and tribal leaders and all these other people, but it gives us an idea of just who is in leadership across our own country and various places around the world. So, that being said, we had a letter, or not a letter, but an email from the Council of Bishops in the Methodist circles that deals with the events of this last week, and that's for your reading. I'm not going to preach on it this morning. Somebody was wondering if I was. But part of the letter says we just celebrated the birth of Jesus. His parents during his infancy had to flee as refugees to Africa to escape the wrath of King Herod. Millions of immigrants across the globe run away from such despicable, life-threatening situations today. Hence, he says we have the Christian duty to be supportive as they flee political, cultural, social dangers in their native homes. Our church, generally, as Methodists, has been involved in national and international issues from the beginning. Bishops Thomas Coke and Francis Asbury met with George Washington in support of the Revolution, much to the chagrin of John Wesley, who was in England and was loyal to the King and the Church of England until he died. But in this part of the world, it was a different situation. But we've been involved in speaking out for the rights and the decency and the dignity of everyone for a long, long time. Smithsonian Magazine this month, no, not this month, I read it this month, May 17th issue of last year, was talking about the renewal of the New York City waterfront and Ellis Island and the hospital on Ellis Island, which is not being repaired at this point. It's fallen into terrible disrepair. And yet, every immigrant that came in went through this hospital. The third class immigrants, the poorest, all of them went through for no cost. Millions of the vast majority of the millions that came in through Ellis Island came on to the mainland and became citizens of the United States. 3,500 died because they came with some disease or illness of some kind. But millions came through there. Their first taste of America was the kindness of strangers. Their first taste of America was the kindness of strangers. Now, I don't know where y'all came from. And y'all doesn't mean I came from south anywhere. But I'm not sure where my Grandma Erickson's people came from. I know where they came from ultimately. They were near Stavanger, not Stavanger, Lillehammer. And Grandpa Erickson immigrated when he was somewhere between 16 and 20 from straight across the border in Sweden. Most of us came through from other countries, or at least our people did at one point or another. And we should try very hard not to lose that sense of kindness of strangers. This week, I think it was this week, Alan Neville, who is a professor at Northern, had a column. He says, although I'm not likely the worthiest Christian, everything I've learned about Christianity seems to be summed up as treat others as you wish to be treated. Do unto others. And he reminded us, the first president of the United States, George Washington, said, the bosom of America is open to receive not only the opulent and respected stranger, but the oppressed and the persecuted of all nations and religions, whom we shall welcome to a participation of all of our rights and privileges. Again, let's not lose that kindness to strangers. Anyway, there's a lot more in both of those. And instead of preaching at length on those things, I thought it would be just as good to put it out there for you to read at your leisure and have time to reflect on it a little more. So there you have it. We also got a letter from Salvation Army thanking us for the $1,515.61 that we gave to them over the holidays, part of our Harvest Festival.
That was second payment too.
That was the second payment?
I got some before.
How much was the first one?
$700 something.
Oh, so we've given them about $2,200 or more, $2,300. So that's something that we can find some pride and satisfaction in. We have the usual announcements. Are there any other announcements that should be brought up?
Kim had her baby on Friday.
Ah, Kim had a baby on Friday. Okay. A baby what?
Baby girl, Gracie Allen.
Gracie Allen?
Ella.
Ella, oh. Yeah, Gracie Ella might be a load to carry around. Gracie Ella, okay. On Friday. That's good news, isn't it? Joyful prayer concern when we get around to that one. So, anything else? Okay, let's not stand and greet and welcome each other, but if you want to say hello to people, just turn around and wave at them. That'll work.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. For those of you who have encountered the ravages of the flu, you know that you don't want to get it, you don't want to hand it on anybody. So, all right. Lord, this year, like Nathan,
We will follow.
well, wait a minute. Turning to the bulletin, to the folder. Lord, this year, like Nathan,
We will follow Jesus, Star of Bethlehem.
Okay, let's stand and sing hymn number 237. Sing We Now of Christmas. 237.
Sing we now,
Okay, as we turn to our prayer time, and direct your attention to the other side of the insert. And hear us as we continue in prayer together. Oh God, we walk in darkness, hiding Jesus' light under a bushel. We feel secure in our abundance, while others are hungry, their lives in peril. Forgive us, restore us, help us to share the good news in the way we live. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.
Keeping up with not doing too many traditional carols. Snow laying on the ground is one. And if you can imagine a harp instead of Bob, and a really nice angelic voice instead of mine, then you'll be in the picture. Dan wanted to do it a little more jazzy, but unfortunately we didn't have time to get that one worked out. So, the snow lay on the ground.
the music was beautiful. So, I have a son who's a cabinet builder, and he kind of has that attitude sometimes. Years ago, he had to build something, and he was showing us, and he said, now, you know, if you open this door and you look back in the corner of this cabinet up in the top, it isn't done right up there. Kathy finally said, who's ever going to see that stuff? Just do what you do. So, remember that, Cindy, do what you do. Good job. Okay, if I can remember, after the scripture, we're going to sing hymn 250, once in Royal David City. Reading then from the Gospel of John, starting with verse 43 of chapter 1. Jesus decided to go to Galilee, and there he found Philip, and said to him, follow me. Now Philip came from Bethsaida, which was the town from which Andrew and Peter came. Philip went and found Nathanael and said to him, we have found the one about whom Moses wrote in the law and about whom the prophets spoke. I mean Jesus, the son of Joseph, the man from Nazareth. Nathanael said to him, really? I added that. He said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip replied, come and see. When Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him, he said, see a man who is really an Israelite, one in whom there is no guile. Nathanael said to Jesus, how do you know me? Before Philip called you, said Jesus, I saw you when you were under a fig tree. Rabbi, answered Nathanael, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel. And Jesus answered, do you believe because I saw you under the fig tree? You'll see greater things than these. You'll see the heavens open and God's angels descending on the Son of Man. The hymn, 250, once in Royal David City. Let's stand and sing that.
Once in Royal David City stood a holy cattle shed, where a mother laid her baby in a manger for his bed. Mary, loving mother of Jesus Christ, the little child. He came down to earth from heaven, who is God and Lord of all. And his shelter was a stable, and his cradle was a stall. In the cornerstone, the lowly lived on earth, our Savior holy. Jesus is our Calvary's pattern, day by day like us he grew. He was little, weak and helpless, tears and smiles like us he knew. And he feeleth for our sadness, and he shareth in our gladness. And our eyes at last shall see him, inward throne redeeming love. For that child so dear and gentle is our Lord in heaven and above. And he leads his children on to the place where he is gone.
Be seated, please. And so at this time, Jesus was going north to Galilee. perhaps to Cana. He found and called Philip, who, like Andrew, couldn't keep the good news to himself. Or, as Bible scholar Frederick Godet said, one lighted torch serves to light another. They were on fire with the Spirit of the Lord. So Philip went to his friend Nathanael and told him he believed that he found the long-promised Messiah in Jesus from Nazareth. And Nathanael, you can just see it in this visual age we live in. If this thing were being portrayed, you could just see Nathan's eyes get big, and I'd say, "What? Really? Something this good out of Nazareth? You got to be kidding!" Scripture foretold that God's chosen one would come from Bethlehem, he would say. Nazareth was just not the kind of place that anything good was likely to come out of. Philip was wise, so he didn't argue. He simply said, "Come and see." Smart move. Few people have ever been argued into Christianity. Or as a professor of mine used to say, you can't drag people kicking and screaming into discipleship. Often arguments do more harm than good. I had a friend who was cornered by somebody who was of a slightly different theological persuasion, and he said this guy just kept at me and kept at me and kept at me. And he said, "Jesus saves!" And this guy says, I just looked at him and I said, "Moses invests." I'm going to save or invest your money. I mean, that's a whole different track. He said, he just looked at me, but he did walk away, which was kind of helpful. So, the only way to convince people of the truth of Christ is to tell the story. The whole story. Not just, sweet baby born in the manger, no crying did he make, but the whole story to the cross. There is a story which tells how towards the end of the 19th century, Aldous Huxley, who was famous as much for being an agnostic as anything else, he was a member of a house party at a country house in England, and Sunday came around and most everybody got ready to go to church, but very naturally Huxley did not propose to go. He did get to talking to one of the men who was ready to leave, and he said, "You have a radiant faith about you. Your Christian faith just radiates. Suppose you don't go to church today. Suppose instead you stay at home and you tell me quite simply what your faith, your Christian faith, means to you and why you're Christian." "But," said the man, "you could demolish my arguments in an instant. I'm not clever enough to argue with you." Huxley replied gently, "I don't want to argue with you. I just want you to tell me simply what this Christ means to you." The man stayed at home and told Huxley most simply of his faith. When he had finished, there were tears in both their eyes. This rugged, reasonable agnostic as well. He said, "I would give my right hand if only I could believe that." It wasn't a clever argument that backed Huxley into a corner and turned his heart around, or touched his heart. He could have dealt efficiently and devastatingly with that. But the simple presentation of Christ caught him by the heart. The best argument is to say to people, "Come and see. Come and see what difference it's made." And I always think of that story about Martin the cobbler, who was waiting for the coming of the Christ to his cobbler shop. And it was cold in the winter, and a voice or an angel had said to him, "Martin, tomorrow Jesus is going to come to your shop." And all day long he waited. And while he waited, he helped some older lady with her kindling, and he gave shoes to a little kid who didn't have shoes, and all kinds of things like that. And at the end of the day, he said, I don't understand it. I thought the Lord was going to come. And he said, and a voice came to him and said, Martin, I did. Every time you helped one of those people, you helped me. Why is it we have so much trouble ourselves? Why do our leaders, sometimes locally or nationally or internationally, why do people forget that? It just isn't that complicated. And the story of the man who was going to be a missionary in the South Sea Islands, and his boat sank and he was washed up on a shore, and the native people rescued him and helped him build a hut. He stayed in the hut, and he stayed on that island for 30 years, and another boat came along, and there was a boatload of missionaries, and they wanted to tell him about Jesus Christ, and they said, well, we know him. Really? Well, yeah, he lives up the road there, up towards the mountain. Well, who is he? Well, he must be this Jesus you're talking about. Did he ever tell you about himself, or did he tell you, what did he say to you? He didn't really say much of anything. He just lived with us. And he helped us when we were sick. He helped us with anything we needed help with, and he shared his food. Come and see. Of course, we have to know Christ ourselves before we can invite others to him, but all we have to do is tell the story, share the story, live the story. It's like that, can't even remember where I saw it the first time. It's been on numerous church boards out in front that say, preach the gospel, if necessary, use words. So Nathanael came, Jesus could see into his heart, and he said, here is a genuine Israelite, a man in whose heart there is no guile. It was a tribute that any devout Israelite would recognize, appreciate. Nathanael was surprised, of course. How could Jesus know him? And went through that in the reading, and we mentioned it again. It was customary for people to, the days before tablets, smartphones, all those things, before anybody was reading very much at all, for people to meditate, sit and reflect on what they had been taught by someone, and for people to, in a hot part of the day, to sit under a fig tree or whatever, was pretty normal. Nathanael had prayed for the day when God's chosen one would come, and now he felt that Jesus had seen into the very depths of his heart as he sat under that tree. It wasn't so much that Jesus had seen him that surprised him, but that he read in Nathanael's innermost heartfelt thoughts and said to himself, here is a man who understands my dreams, who knows my prayers, who's seen my innermost thoughts, which I've never myself put into words even. But this Jesus knows them. He's seen them. He's heard them. Here is the man who can translate the inarticulate sigh of my mind and my soul. This must be God's promised anointed one who satisfied my heart and whom I will believe and follow. Now Nathanael wrote all this down. But his response, whether he would put in those words or not, his response was built on those deepest, innermost feelings that we have. One of the most most beautiful things I think that can happen to any of us is to have friends or loved ones or people that are important to us almost sense who we are and what we believe and feel. I mean, we can't just wait around and think, well, if they really love me, they know what I'm thinking. I mean, that's kind of that's not what I'm talking about. But when people are so in tune to the relationship that they know even more deeply than we can express who we are and what we feel and what we believe and what we value and what we can be trusted and counted upon to do. Some have said, well, who was this Nathaniel anyway? The fourth gospel, he's one of the first group of disciples. The other three gospels don't mention him at all. Many explanations have been given, but the quest for the historical Nathaniel isn't the issue any more than the quest for the historical Jesus. Could be interesting, but that isn't the essence of the relationship we have between people and between us and Jesus. It's the effect that they have on our lives. It's the way they touch who we are. Been suggested Nathaniel wasn't even a real person, but one who stood for an ideal type, one who was set before the people of Israel as the ideal Israelite, whose heart was cleansed of pride and prejudice and harmful selfishness, one who saw in Jesus the one who satisfied the longing of their waiting and seeking hearts. It's all about something deeper than what we own, deeper than what we can accumulate, deeper than the control we have over others or even over ourselves. Remember Paul said one time, he said, the things that I shouldn't do, I do, and the things I should do, I don't. Paul said that. I mean, don't we have moments like that when we think, rats, I wasn't going to say that again. I wasn't going to talk like that. I wasn't going to think these things. For us, we have to say something like, another envelope full of black coupons from Herberger's ought to be set on fire and put in the ash can. I mean, those things tempt us to the point of evil. I mean, how many clothes do you need? I wasn't going to do that, but we do. There's so many things that we just kind of, well, what coming and seeing means is way beyond all those things. It touches those things. But that's what Nathaniel experienced with Jesus. How does he know me so well? How does he know what I think, what I long for, what I need? And our prayer could be, nonetheless, thy will be done. Your will be done. You can give me everything I ask for, but I probably still wouldn't be satisfied. Give me what you know I need. And so to the God who welcomes us all in love, let's pray. We pray for the good of the church, concerns of those in need. God of every land and nation, you have created all people. You dwell among us in Jesus and the Spirit. Listen to the cries of those who pray to you, all of us who pray to you, and grant that as we speak and sing of your greatness, all people will know the power of love at work in the world. stand and sing that.
He is born, the holy child, play the boy bagpipes merrily. He is born, the holy child, sing we all of Savior mild. Through long ages of the past, prophets have foretold his coming. Through long ages of the past, now the time has come at last. He is born, the holy child, play the lute and bagpipes merrily. He is born, the holy child, sing we all of the Savior mild. Oh, how lovely, oh, how pure is this perfect child of heaven. Oh, how lovely, oh, how pure, gracious gift to mankind. He is born, the holy child, play the mule and the bagpipes merrily. He is born, the holy child, sing we all of the Savior mild. Jesus, Lord of all the world, coming as a child among us. Jesus, Lord of all the world, grant to us thy heavenly peace. He is born, the holy child, play the oboe and bagpipes merrily. He is born, the holy child, sing we all of the Savior mild.
Please be seated. We are a people who are richly blessed. It's fitting that we share some of our material blessings for the work of the church, not only within these walls or in our own community, but throughout the world, which we'll do at this time, receiving our morning offering.
we light the nations. Bless our gifts today. May they touch lives and transform the world. May your light shine in our lives each day, that others might become disciples of Jesus and be drawn to you. And in his name we pray. Amen.
Our last hymn this morning is 218, Came Upon the Midnight Clear.
Pretty awesome. We're pretty close. He had to get out of there. He was waiting for you. Ever not finish my coffee? Nice tattoo. You part of the gang? Hells That last that one gives me chills. Good to see you. Gotta get here on time. Somebody recommended my name, so I'm thinking he might have something to do with the theater, but if he I totally forgot to announce our Raven.
Oh,
I totally forgot.
what day is it?
Wait, everybody come back!
Is that this Thursday?
Saturday.
Saturday.